Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
Welcome to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. It's so good to have you back on.
How's it, guys? How's it going?
Pretty good. Ben, let me give you a proper introduction. Joining us on the line is Ben Davidson. He's the director of the Mobile Observatory Project and the SuspiciousObservers.com. He has more than 200,000 subscribers to his daily news show, which covers weather, space weather, and planetary changes. His primary research produced the first mathematical algorithm to successfully correlate solar magnetic fields with earthquakes. And he will be a featured presenter at the Conscience Life Expo, which I think you're heading out to tomorrow, I think, Ben. Thanks for joining us on the Liberty Brothers.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, no, it was great. Great. We had you first time. It was a great interview. We put it out. It got wide distribution. It got picked up by, thankfully, we're very fortunate that a lot of the alternative media picks up our articles and stuff and their videos, and we thought it was great. We're glad to have you back.
And I'm just blown away by you've got such a hardcore group of followers that follow your work every day. They're just so supportive of you that they start sharing things out. We just saw massive hits from within your own YouTube community there. So yeah.
Well, they're more than just supporters. They're contributors. We really are a collective of about 212,000 people now, and everybody shares things. It's not just sharing what I produce, but they share things with me. They share interesting interviews, they share articles, they share new papers, and so it's really a fantastic community, and it's so much bigger than just one person. It really is a team effort all around.
Well, your website's second to none, my friend, and your reporting is stellar. Now, here's something, Ben. I'm waiting to ask you, man. I've been waiting to ask you for you to come on the program. The reports came out here, and I want to say we're 10 days into this 2-week prediction. Apparently, there's some ancient gases escaping from the Yellowstone area, which normally, my old, I know it could be an extinction level event, of course, but Jason and I are fairly close to that. I don't know if we're within the blast zone, so to speak, but we're pretty close. What in the world's going on with that Yellowstone thing? They say the ancient gas is being released that they haven't seen, I want to say, for thousands of years. And I don't even know how they can tell ancient gas from thousands of years, or what that even means. But what is your assessment of the Yellowstone situation, please?
Well, I hadn't actually heard anything about gas that hadn't been seen for thousands of years. I'd love to go check that out, because that would certainly be something interesting. I know that the general rule with Yellowstone is to be very, very wary of anything that'll make you scared. There's this odd non-uniform cycle that Yellowstone has, where every 8 to 12 months it has this sudden, seemingly out of the blue uptick in both seismic activity, earthquakes, and in geyser activity. There's a lot stronger geyser activity. Sometimes there's geysers that are normally inactive that become active. And this happens every 8 to 12 months pretty much. And the only other thing that happens every 8 to 12 months is people start getting worried that Yellowstone is going to blow. And it makes for very good clickbait, if you know what I mean. It makes it very easy to create a title on an article or a video that gets people to click on it. But one thing I've noticed, that not only does this happen pretty much every year, but during the summer months, it gets hot enough there, both from the sun and from the geothermal activity below, that there's a road that melts somewhere in Yellowstone almost every year. If you Google Yellowstone road melts 2008, 2007, 2001, you're going to pretty easily find this stuff. And so it's really, really difficult, because that's one of the main things that you worry about in terms of a major natural disaster here in the United States, I tend to see it as, I'm going to pay attention to these things, but I'm not going to let these fears of an imminent eruption take over my life. Because if you do that, and I've seen people who are just obsessed with Yellowstone, they get into a tizzy every 8 to 12 months when these upticks occur, and then it basically consumes their lives for a month or two. I'm not terribly worried about Yellowstone. As I said, I haven't seen that information you were mentioning about the ancient gas.
Let me give you the headline. Yellowstone belches ancient helium. Gas stored in the Earth's crust for hundreds of millions of years is released by volcanic hotspot. That's the headline.
What's the source on that?
Smithsonian, Smithsonian.com.
Interesting. Now
I'll say.
Yeah, the story I had heard came off of IntelliHub, and that was based more on a park ranger who was named, saying that they are covering up data as far as earthquakes and whatnot. And and what's funny is we were actually going to get someone on it, and they were saying that within 2 weeks this could happen. And of course, the person couldn't come on for the 2 weeks. So I was like, well, we might be dead, But I think what I found in the research is really they're not expecting anything to happen there in the next 10,000 years, really.
Well, you know what's interesting? And I also like to mention that this year there was an especially large fervor about it because the uptick in seismic and geyser activity occurred the same week that there was a big thunderstorm there, a really bad storm, and it was right about the time when you expect the seasonal animal migrations. So there was a lot of electric activity going on there. There are animals that look like they're fleeing when, in fact, they were just following their natural migration patterns. But it was really kind of a scary thing. One thing I will mention is that I don't know how much we really got into this last time, but the sun is going into sort of a magnetic hibernation phase over 50 to 70 years. And a lot of the research suggests that major volcanic eruptions happen during the times of what we call inactive solar periods, or times when the cosmic radiation from the galaxy is prominent rather than solar radiation. So we are entering that time period where we might expect to be seeing more volcanoes. And, it's not just volcanoes, it's more earthquake activity as well. Those things sort of go together. And so we are entering that period. Whether or not we can say there's anything happening with Yellowstone, I don't know. I will tell you this. If we go for 5 or 6 years and we don't see one of those seismic upticks or the geyser upticks, that might actually make me worry, because what I see the seismic and geyser upticks that happen every single year as are really just pressure release. There's pressure constantly building up under the ground there. It needs to be released somehow. Well, if we don't see that pressure release for 5 or 6 years, you got to start to wonder, well, is that building up right there under Yellowstone? Kind of like how you see tons of little earthquakes in California every single day, and yet it's the other parts of the Ring of Fire that have the really massive earthquakes. Well, maybe all those little earthquakes in California are sort of releasing a lot of the pressure that would have otherwise built up into a big one. Take that same thought process and apply it to Yellowstone. We see these earthquake surges and these surges in geyser activity almost every year. We can just call it about every year, which make me think it's releasing a bit of pressure, kind of like it should. If we stop seeing that, I think we might be able to question whether or not it's getting ready for a bigger eruptive event.
Ben, we're pretty far into the new year now. I think we had you on before we hit 2015. And there were certain things you were specifically looking at coming into the new year. What's your biggest blip on your radar right now? Has that changed? Is it still kind of what's going on with the sun and going into that dormant period? Or is there other events you're really kind of keeping an eye on at this point?
Earth's magnetic situation is a constant concern. We had amazing leaps forward in our understanding of how our planet is acting just in the last year, and this year the call to action is really, let's see what happens next. We are I never like to be the fearmonger guy, but there are certain serious situations at hand, and to be ignorant of them or to not want to talk about them for fear of being called a fearmonger, I think is probably not right. So, as scary as it sounds, Earth is absolutely in the middle of a magnetic reversal. Some people call this a magnetic pole shift. It really doesn't matter what we call it, but it's in the process of happening right now. And with that, the more important portion of that is that our magnetic shield is actually weakening. The magnetic shield of Earth, the magnetosphere, the thing that protects us from that solar radiation and the galactic cosmic radiation I just mentioned earlier. It's really sort of taken a beating here as the poles are flipping. We've already lost 15 to 20% of the shield that really makes Earth what it is, makes it habitable, makes us able to live here and be here. And if that gets down, too much further, you really have to be concerned about being out in the solar radiation, being worried about cosmic radiation that might come through. We do a lot of studying. You mentioned the fact that we've finally had a statistical correlation of certain solar activities to earthquakes. Well, it's not just that. It's hurricanes, it's volcanoes, it's these typhoons, cyclones, tornado outbreaks, things like that. As we lose our magnetic shield, the sun's going to have a more and more direct influence over natural disasters on our planet. And the same goes for those which are triggered by the galactic cosmic rays. And so that's definitely something that we're continuing to monitor.
Let me ask you this, Ben. I'm not sure where your thoughts are on geoengineering and some of the chemtrailing programs that we're seeing with the what's purported to be the Indigo Skyfold project and some of these other things. But there's no doubt that there's something going up in the skies. And one of the premises that is put out there is that they're trying to protect us from some of this space weather and whatnot. Would the spraying of heavy metal salts like aluminum and barium and whatnot, would that do any good for protecting us from any of this stuff with the magnetic shield, or is that really just conspiracy fodder?
The answer is yes, but I don't want to make it seem like it's a good thing that they're spraying.
I don't think it's a good thing at all. Let me preface that. But,
imagine if you are put in this position, and as the field is weakening already, which is you're already exposed to more of this space radiation and space energy than you otherwise would. Back in 2010, they started noticing giant breaches in the magnetosphere where the solar plasma will just pour into the atmosphere, and so. Yeah, it's one way to think about it where you say, okay, we're down 15 to 20%. But you also got to realize that these breaches in our shield open and close back up from time to time. And imagine if you have to make this decision. Imagine that you're the man, you're them, you're they. And you have to make the decision, okay, we can either explain to everyone why it's no longer safe to go outside between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. and hope that anarchy and panic and chaos doesn't ensue, because what you're essentially telling them is that the planet is shutting down and we could have absolutely catastrophic events. You know what happens the next day? Chances are there's a run on the banks, a run on the grocery stores, a run on the gas stations, and anything you'd want to save would be gone in a few days anyway. Your other option is to play God in the sky, try and do it, try to keep it a secret, and do your best to try to block as much of the radiation as possible. It's the kind of thing where I know that my initial gut first reaction is, don't you go spraying anything in my sky. Are you insane? And when I think about the people who are, quote, awake or are able to understand and comprehend that there is something other than what the mainstream is telling us and not completely lose their minds, when you look at this community, people who'll be listening to this radio broadcast, you think to yourself, well, okay, we can handle this, just level with us. Tell us the truth. Unfortunately, and this is the hardest thing to get over when you're somebody in our position, is to remember that even though we have more and more people waking up every day, we are still just such a tiny minority on this planet, and the majority of people wouldn't be able to handle it. it's fairly rudimentary mass psychology. What?
It
Yeah.
really is a cognitive
I mean,
disconnect.
what happens if you tell these people that, oh, wait a minute, we are not in complete control and something is happening here that could completely change our way of life? I mean, it's almost, I wouldn't want to be the one who had to make that decision. Do I trust the entire human race with this information? Not about, you know, what would they do with the information? This isn't like giving them, free energy and hoping they don't build a super weapon with it. We're talking about information that should really rock the foundation of everybody's day-to-day life, where you can't just sit in your closet and be scared all day, but you have to think about the fact that this is something that does not happen very often on this planet. We're way overdue for it, and all signs say it's coming right now. It's a I end my program every day with eyes open, no fear. But to a certain extent, you should be concerned about things like this. And I think that if the majority of people on the planet realized just how bad things were and where the trends were going, I'm not sure the economy would sustain. I'm not sure civilization. I'm not sure order would remain. And so this is a very, very difficult topic, a very, very difficult problem that they are in. Once again, I don't have any idea who they is. I'm wishing that guy.
But it does leave us who are awake, that minority, to try to figure it out on our own, and doing that as thinking, human beings. My personal belief is probably a culmination of a few different projects overlapping. And some have probably more of a noble aim than others, trying to save the planet, try to keep it from going into anarchy, whereas there are probably some others that are much more nefarious. But the truth always seems to be somewhere in the middle.
And who's to say that they're even wholly separate from one another? For example, they could block aerosol. They could block the this space radiation with barium, silver, aluminum. Any number of these could theoretically work, and there's others I didn't mention. At the same time, Monsanto has all these patents on aluminum-resistant crops, so only one of those helps Monsanto. It's unfortunate that the aluminum one is probably the most harmful to us. I'm not saying it's good to be breathing in these barium salts and these silver oxides, and things like that. But it's certainly not as bad as the aluminum. So there's that give and take. Do they ever really let something like this go to waste? Yeah, they're going to do this to save the planet. Did they fund it by agreeing to use aluminum? Taking Monsanto's money? Is that how they got part of the funding for this? I mean, I don't have a single shred of evidence to support what I just said, but these are the kinds of questions that are far more helpful to the geoengineering opposition than a lot of what you hear when you start looking at this stuff online. People want to get up in arms and go burn down a government building, or they want to just scream about how we're all being poisoned. It's questions like that. Okay, well, where are they getting the funding? Who is actually doing this? It's wonderful that guy made a video called "What in the World Are They Spraying?" and then "Why in the World Are They Spraying?" Perhaps his next video should try to be "Who in the World is Spraying?" Because we've never gotten a really good idea about who is doing this. It'd be so much easier if we had a name to put with this.
Well, that might be coming out in little chunks. I mean, we at least have a project name now, the Indigo Skyfold Project. We didn't have that for very long. There are some supposed pilots. Of course, you can't really. How do you vet this with such a compartmentalized, group of people? There's talk of drones doing this. I mean, really, all we can do is video document what's happening above us. But it's so hard to verify any of these people who say, yeah, I was involved in this project. Yeah. How do you know?
It's really difficult, especially because they're doing it in plain sight. One of their only ways of keeping it secret is to control the opposition. whether you call it a control opposition or a limited hangout, isn't really important. The important thing to realize is that as much as people in our community can look at a mainstream news program and recognize all the ways that it is engineered to control the thought process of the masses, you have to take a step back and realize that the effort and the level of complexity with which they aim to control our thought process is far more important and more prevalent. They try way harder. I mean, they spend more money getting their message out to the masses, but in terms of what it takes to control the thoughts of the mainstream, it's much harder to do that than it is to control us. But they still do a very good job of controlling the geoengineering opposition. Like, for example, not only do I have problems being able to vet certain facts that come out, there are certain websites that, I question every single thing I read on those websites. And these happen to be the ones that are considered the top anti-geoengineering websites in the world. If they are truly trying to stop this radiation, if they're truly trying to protect their cattle, which would be us, but they're also willing to have these negative aspects of it, like maybe they're in bed with Monsanto, maybe they're in bed with pharmaceutical companies who would see millions or billions of extra dollars if allergy season was a little bit worse one year, there are all these ways you can start thinking about it. If they can get everybody in our community to think and to say crazy things that can't possibly be true, then nobody will ever take us seriously and their operation really isn't in jeopardy. I do know this. I do know that when you start to Google things like persistent contrails 1980, persistent contrails 1970, persistent contrails 1960 or 1950, you begin to see things from the 40s, the 30s. You can go back a long way and you would say, if I saw that outside my window right now, I would swear it's a chemtrail. And so our community has been engineered to be over-inclusive, fearful, jumping to conclusions, and not really have any sort of centrality to it. I'm not saying that there should be like a central leadership to the geoengineering opposition, but there needs to be some sort of way to not have every crazy thing that's said on the internet in this realm of discussion be put on everyone. So, like, for example, we all know that there are people who claim that they sprayed the United States with Ebola and that there was about to be a massive Ebola outbreak in the United States. Yeah, we had a few cases, but they were all people who had gone to Africa or who had been in contact with the people who went from Africa. So I'm sure when the Ebola thing was coming out, you guys all had to have heard that they're spraying the Ebola out of planes.
I've heard that. I heard about the zombie spray that they can put out there that, makes everyone cannibals. You just got to take it with a grain of salt, though.
Everybody who is not part of this opposition right now, everybody who is aware of it from the outside or who's going to stumble across it in the next weeks, in the coming months, they're going to find all of that stuff. And everybody who is opposed to geoengineering is going to have all of that stuff put on them. So, like, for example, I talk a lot about the changes seen on Earth and seen throughout the solar system. I happen to think that Nibiru came a long time ago, but it never left. And it's either Jupiter or Saturn. And I have a lot of good reasons to think this. So I'm of the mindset that what's happening right now in the solar system is almost entirely driven by our sun. I can't find a single moon being gravitationally pulled out of place. This all seems to be energetic and based on our star. But because I'm talking about all these changes throughout the solar system, every single day you can find somebody commenting on the videos that, oh, this person's a Nibiru follower. This person thinks Nibiru is about to come get us. Why? Because I'm talking about these changes throughout the solar system that most people don't hear about, most news outlets aren't talking about. But when they find that pocket of information that's about a certain topic, everything that's been said about that topic gets put onto everybody in that group. And so the question is, how do we elevate the anti-geoengineering community above the craziest things that get said within the community? Because you understand it, it's like it's almost like a weakest link kind of thing, a poison seed kind of thing where.
Well, Ben, let me interject, Ben, for a second here. What you're seeing, sort of what you're talking about is, I'm not sure if you've been following the whole measles outbreak thing, and now now you've got with the vaccinations this whole push. Now, whether you agree with vaccinations or not, it's really not important for this topic, for this discussion. But the fact is that they are trying to, now they're saying they want to forcibly make people be forcibly vaccinated. And the funny thing is, it's the people that actually have the vaccinations, not in all cases, but in some cases, are the ones that are actually spreading the disease. It's
Really?
like
See, that's not at all what I had heard. That's interesting. I'd love to get some info on that. First of all, I am very against a lot of vaccinations. I think that the notion that no baby should ever have any vaccinations ever might be pushing it a little bit too far. But certainly the accelerated schedule of vaccines is absolutely preposterous, especially since the first thing, or one of the first things every parent knows is if your kid's got a bad fever, it's dangerous because it could damage their brain. What is supposed to happen when you get a vaccine? You're supposed to get a little sick. You're supposed to get a little bit of a fever. So what happens when you have this accelerated vaccine schedule is you're basically inducing sickness. You are inducing fever in the child, the very same thing that can damage their brain, which is why it's not like every single person is going to get this kind of thing. But anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. But, the point is that I had heard that, it was people who hadn't been vaccinated that were really getting it. I wasn't aware that there had been like failed vaccines or anything. That's really kind of scary.
Yeah, I think it's called viral shedding that happens, that opens it up. Mike Adams actually has a good article that came out this morning on naturalnews.com talking about that specific.
Let me write that down, actually. That's interesting.
Well, more to the point where you're talking about this mentality, this, people can't really think for themselves, and you've got the propaganda media. They're making statements on Fox News. They're making statements like vaccine effectiveness is settled science. It's settled science. These people that don't want to vaccinate their kids, they're bitter clingers, and of course we're called all kinds of names. Even though the actual, and I know you're not a vaccine guy, Ben. I didn't have you had to talk about vaccines, but you brought up the drug companies, and I think that all these, and in my view, drug companies, oil companies, at the top, all these people they're all tied in a lot together. A lot of the same people in their boards sit on each other's boards, and it's a good old boy network, and we're really not in it. But I just said that to say it's that mentality of people that forget about your personal rights. Let's just force people because we're scared, because we're fearful of the measles, for crying out loud, that doesn't even really kill anybody, that we want to force people to get vaccinated. And I think it's that same thing with you're talking about with the geoengineering. They hear a little bit of evidence and they think because it comes from somebody sitting in a $10,000 or $10 million studio in a $5,000 suit that it must be true. We got to break that paradigm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this 3-part article called Skyception. It's brilliant.
I have not.
No.
It's by a guy. He doesn't want his name to be released, so he goes by the online alias Morpheus, oddly enough. But anyway, if you were just to Google Skyception, like the word deception, but instead of the DE at the beginning, it's the word sky. He has a 3-part series which basically introduces people to the concept of aerosol spraying. And he's very big. He doesn't like the word chemtrails. He doesn't even like solar radiation management. He likes to call it aerosol spraying. Yeah.
Geoengineering. I mean, it just kind of gets away from the whole tinfoil hat.
And so he introduces people to the topic, and then he goes through every single theory or, group of theories that have invaded this topic in general. And he breaks them down one by one, and he goes through the logic of each, and he ends up making a decision on which one he thinks is the most logical. And that one was actually the fact that, as bad as some things are and as bad as some things could be, apart from a meteor or an asteroid absolutely obliterating the planet in an extinction level event, there are very few things that can stand up to the destructive nature of chaos. Because when you start to have runs on banks and grocery stores, the economy collapses and people begin to starve. And then you have rioting, and then you have looting. And pretty soon the water systems are either not working or they're not properly sanitized. And then you're essentially back in the Stone Age. And literally not a single natural disaster would have taken place just because of fear among the people. And so you have this really almost scary situation taking place at Earth right now. And as much as they want to take advantage of the situation, whether they're getting money from this company or that group or whatever, I think that above all, they want to keep this game going. And a part of it is keeping their cattle, us, alive, but it's also keeping this game going. I would have to imagine that whoever is doing the geoengineering, at very least, is tied in with strong economic interests. Whoever they've been playing this game for a very long time. They're very good at it. They've been winning, and they don't want this game to come to an end, because everything that puts them on the top of the pyramid all of a sudden doesn't exist anymore.
It'd have to be some. I mean, if you look at just the infrastructure needed to be flying these patterns that are oftentimes above or below the commercial jetliner area that they fly within, and they're just constantly doing it. I mean, I'm videoing them, multiple times a day, just here in Butte, Montana, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, I would have to think there's some very big money behind it.
Ben, let me ask you real quick here. We're coming towards the end, and we'd love to have you. It sounds like you would. We'd love to have you stay over for at least 15 minutes after into the next hour. I noticed that your concern before about the polar shift that you're talking about, and I certainly know you don't have a time machine to look back in history. However, apparently it's been speculated that there's been 4 or 5 different civilizations that have been here before us, and some archaeological findings and cave drawings and stuff. It lends that there are at least some other civilizations. I don't know how many, but do you think this event that we're facing here could be the type of event that would wipe out? I mean, we're talking extinction level event here coming up with this this polar shift.
Absolutely. I did a video a couple of months back called Super Flood. I believe that these pole flips, and it was talking about how, when the pole flips and the magnetosphere weakens, we lose our shield. These tend to be correlated not only with these extinction events here on Earth. In fact, some scientists believe that this is how you get a major extinction on the planet. You have one of these events. But not only that, but there's a mechanism involved with this that could really bring about the kind of thing that would make everyone on the planet talk about a flood. Regardless of what people might say about religion, this or that, when almost every ancient culture describes something like a flood or seeing these sights in the sky, maybe you want to listen to them, because these are the people who made our math, who learned how to track the planets and things like that. I've always found it interesting that we can build so much of our science and our math on the foundations they gave us, but then we look at their accounts of what they saw in the sky and what they experienced, and we sort of poo-poo it as myth or, just their imagination. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there, and we should probably give their accounts of these things a little bit better position in our thoughts.
Ben, we're getting ready to come to the end of the first hour here, and the music's going to start playing. Why don't you give out your websites, YouTube channel, anything. I know you're going to the big conference starting tomorrow. Kudos on that. You have the floor.
Right on. Well, if you just Google Suspicious Observers, you won't get halfway through the word before Google knows what you're looking for. The first couple of links that'll be under there will all be mine. It's free 5 to 6 minute news every single day. There's a ton more on the website. We're going to be at the Conscious Life Expo at the LAX Hilton pretty much all weekend here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's great. That's great. And how's your observatory doing?
Well, the observatory is doing well. I'd have to be absolutely crazy to bring that into Los Angeles. So it is being stored at one of the observers' houses over in Phoenix, and we're gonna go snatch that up on my way home to get my. I'm not sure if I mentioned last time, but my wife is pregnant. She's just entered her 3rd trimester, and so we're kind of cutting the tour in the middle here to get her home and resting. Then I'm going to come back out west probably in April and finish up the last few states, last few cities, and then actually show up to PrepperCon, which is in Salt Lake City in late April. Not a lot of people know about that one, but it's like Comic-Con, but for preppers. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
All right, folks. Well, that's the first hour of Liberty Brothers radio show. Stick with us on the other side of the break. We still have Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers coming back, and General Valley coming on later on in the hour. Stick with us. Well, we're back with Ben. Ben, so you're going to this conference. Can you tell us a little bit about the conference you're going to there in L.A. and what you're going to be talking about there?
This conference is it's sort of on the edge of my wheelhouse, if you will. It's called the Conscious Life Expo. It is the largest expo in the world for those, I don't know how you want to say this, outside of the matrix, those who have their eyes open, who are awake, those who recognize that there is another world that is hidden in plain sight from most people, and those who are looking into stuff that is beyond just the mainstream, alternative ways of thinking, alternative medicines, new science. Pretty much you name it, it's there. And I've got a lecture, 2 workshops, and I'm on 3 panels. It's going to be a lot of fun. Tomorrow night, I'm giving a lecture on how the sun triggers disasters on the planet. And so we've talked a little bit about how earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons, all these things can be triggered and highly affected by solar activity. And I'm going to describe how that takes place. Saturday is a very busy day. I've got a workshop on star water, which has basically 2 prongs to it. It describes how Earth got most of its water. It's not from comets, and it's the reason why Earth has so much more water than the other planets in our solar system. And it also goes into detail about why there is going to be water just about everywhere we look in just about any solar system, and some of the ways that that has implications for what would happen if we ever saw aliens, for example. So, like, there's no way aliens would ever come here because they wanted our resources, because they wanted our water, because there is so much water out there and there's so many resources, minerals, this and that, that there would just be no reason to. And so there's these things that are not just interesting science, you know, the fact that there's water everywhere, but they can help you begin to frame your thoughts about other situations like, okay, why would aliens come to visit us type of thing. And then I'm on what's known as the George Norrie Science Panel. I'll be on with a guy named Nassim Haramein, Greg Braden. There's David Wilcox on there, a number of other fun individuals. We've also got the Conspiracy Panel. Oliver Stone's son is on that. That should be fairly interesting. I have no idea what to expect there, but it should be very interesting.
Oh, Sean Stone's pretty straight up guy. He's he's kind of with us. He's awake. He knows what's going on. I think you'll like Sean Stone.
Right on. That should be a lot of fun. The only thing I've got going on Sunday, although Sunday's a very exciting day, Sunday I'm on a geoengineering panel, actually, with the man who made What in the World Are They Spraying and Why in the World Are They Spraying. And so this idea of elevating the geoengineering opposition to something that's beyond just some crazy little group of people, according to the mainstream, how we can actually get this into some better discourse. And then
Will you be videoing it by chance? Because I'd love to see
that. There are, of course, tickets for anybody who can get there in person, but I convinced them to do a lot of stuff live stream. And so tickets for that can be bought, right there on the website as well. And that's another thing. You just Google Conscious Life Expo, and it's the only thing you're going to find there, really. Then the last thing, Monday, it's a post-conference intensive. I call it the near-term future of Earth, where we're basically going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to be talking about how the sun changing is going to affect our climate. We're going to talk about how the Earth changing with the magnetic pole shift and the magnetosphere weakening is going to affect us. We're going to talk about how, politics and the economy play a role in this, and basically going to take a look at what are the kind of things we can expect to see over the next 10, 20, 50 years. Because there's a lot on the table, and it's really hard to get your head around it. You'll very, very quickly feel like you're drowning in the material.
Well, Ben, you talk about this pole flipping thing and the reversal of the magnetic magnetosphere. Can you explain to our listeners what that would look like? I mean, because you just saying it's something that's going to be a big game changer, I don't think really puts across what is there a way to even survive it? Is this something you could even prep for, or are we just pretty much just
if you're in part of the world that gets a shift of the equatorial bulge, like a lot of people don't know this, but centrifugal force, because of how the Earth spins, there is a 13-mile bulge at the equator. So literally, if you want to talk about distance from center of the planet, the sea level at the equator is 13 miles higher than it is at the poles. If there's any kind of change whatsoever to our axis, to our rotational orientation or whatever, you're going to have thousands of feet high tsunamis going in certain places. And if one of those hits you, or if you're 50 miles from Yellowstone and it blows, no, there's really not a whole lot you can do. However, we're all still here, and the Earth has gone through this multiple times. There's a very good chance that it is survivable. And so you just want to prep the same way you'd be prepping for anything else. And you want to sort of have all your bases covered. It's most people, if they're into prepping, they've gone beyond thinking about food and water. They've got seeds. They've got industrial tools. They've got batteries. They've got Faraday cages in case of an EMP. They've got weapons. They've got guns or crossbows or things like that. And so it's just keeping all your bases covered. For example, I think it's good to have a bunch of maps of your local area. So if you have to bug out, you can basically know where you are. I think it's really helpful to have books on what edible plants or edible bugs are in your part of the world. So just in case you aren't in the habit of eating bugs and things you find off the ground on a regular basis, that's something you can at least, if not be prepared for, you can have a reference for. Things as simple as taking an old satellite dish. It's got to be one that hasn't been bent, but if it's got that nice curve to it, just go to Hobby Lobby or Joann Fabrics or some other place that sells craft material. Buy a bunch of these tiny, tiny little mirrors that you can buy. Glue them all over those things, and you've got a solar amplifier that can create fire. It's the kind of thing where, as always, you don't want to do anything that's going to screw up your life today, but you don't want to be so unprepared that if something happens tomorrow, you'll be screwed.
Well, let me throw this at you, and I don't want to jump too far down the conspiracy hole here, but you see all these elites building their underground bunkers, and they're preparing for this, elongated time of not being able to spend, to live on the surface of the earth. You've talked about how, we've gone through this before. Yeah. Are we looking at a situation where the only people that are really going to survive are these elites? Are these people that have this underground bunkers? And you've heard reports of underground in
I'll tell you what.
Go ahead.
That's probably the last place I'd go. There are so many. I think that this is this is the kind of thing where a lot of people are going to spend a ton of money on death traps here. Now, yes, there may be some that are built very very well and in good locations. But you could build the best underground shelter in the world. If you get hit with an earthquake in your area, it is going to fracture. You cannot build to take on the force of the planet. If there is a gigantic flood, hopefully, and assuming that you've got your thing watertight, I hope the flood doesn't stay there. Or I hope sediment hasn't, buried you, 10, 100 feet down. If there's a volcano, you could be covered in 50 feet of basalt if you manage to survive being burned alive or things like that. There are so many ways that an underground bunker can be a death trap. The best thing to do is find a natural pyramid. I think that it's very possible that the pyramids, among other things, could have been used as survival bunkers. Because the interesting thing, just like you can put your finger over the top of a straw that's sticking out of a cup and then pull the straw out and the water is just kind of stuck there in the straw, that same principle of, there has to be a way for the air to get out in order for water to be moving. Let's say you found a cave that there was only one entrance to, but the cave basically went up into a mountain. Let's say that the cave entrance was down near the bottom of the mountain, and there was no other exit to the cave. You could climb all the way up into that mountain, and the water's just not going to get very far up in there, because even if the entire mountain is covered in water, there's still going to be that air pocket underneath. The air's not going to get out, and it's going to keep the water out, kind of thing. Michael Steinbacher knows a lot about this. He does electric universe geology. It's the kind of thing that may have happened a long time ago, actually, in the U.S. Southwest. It's not going to be the kind of thing where the movie 2012, those worst scenes are going to be what you find all over the planet. But weather's going to get scarier. There will be more earthquakes, more volcanoes. The kind of thing that some people translated into religious doomsday, this kind of thing that other cultures translated into stories of jealous and capricious gods doing battle in the sky and here on Earth. Just the kind of stuff that really we haven't seen for hundreds, maybe thousands of years.
Well, that does not
right.
Make me want to sleep well tonight, I have to say. No, really, I don't sit around and worry about that kind of thing because, honestly, Ben, when it really comes right down to it, we can prepare for these things, as you said, but we can't control them. How can we control the sun or the poles or, I don't know. I mean, I know they're spraying, apparently. They're trying to deflect it or minimize it. Yeah. But how are we going to change the pole flip? How's Ben and Jim and Jason going to do anything? We're not.
No, definitely not. It's just the kind of thing where at some point, if nature's got it in for you, you're going to go. But let's say you get lucky and all you have to deal with is the fact that society everywhere else has crumbled. And yeah, you got a little bit worse weather, but maybe you're not in a volcano zone or an earthquake zone or a tsunami zone. And maybe you've just got to deal with the fact that, okay, there's 10,000 people within 10 square miles of you, and there is no society. There's no way to get food into the grocery stores. There's no water system. Everybody around you is just as hungry, just as thirsty, and they've all got guns. And so no matter what you face in that type of situation, you don't want to be unprepared. If it was just, okay, either you're going to die in a terrible catastrophe or you're not, then maybe, okay, don't prep, fine. But, there's another side to it for sure.
Well, Ben, we're coming up here. We have another guest coming on here at the bottom of the hour, and we don't want to take up too much of your valuable time. We really, man, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you being on. You're a great guest. Your website's great. Your reporting's great. Very intelligent and articulate, man. And we just so much appreciate you coming back on with us again.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, guys. Always good talking to you.
All right. Well, have safe travels to your gig in LA, and hopefully we'll have you on again.
Give websites out again before you go, Ben. One more time. Give websites out, YouTube, that type of stuff.
Absolutely. The YouTube is Suspicious Observers. The website is suspiciousobservers.org. If you just start Googling Suspicious Observers, you won't even get to the word observers. You'll see it pop up there. We're the Observatory Project we talked about earlier. That's observatoryproject.com. And we'll be at the Conscious Life Expo all weekend.
All right. Well, thanks again. And yeah, we definitely want to have you on again soon. It's always great talking to you. And best of luck with the new addition on your family on the way. And
travel safe, man.
Have a good one.
Awesome.
You too. Thanks, man.
All right. Bye.